Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Bird's Nest Podcast. I'm Joe Donahue. Thank you so much for joining us. The NFL schedule was released this evening, and we have the roadmap for the Eagles this season. The NFL partners with Amazon Web Services to put together the schedule from over 100,000 realistic combinations. At the start of the season, there's more than a quadrillion, but by the time all of the opponents are sorted out, closer to about 100,000 realistic combinations. The schedule release also gives the individual team's social media teams the opportunity to shine. It's effectively their Super Bowl, as they try to put it out a video in a way that is engaging and is exciting. And if you haven't checked out the Eagles video this year, you absolutely should, because it does a really good job of highlighting the passion of Eagles fans.
I see Brian Dawkins slamming Algie Crumpler right there at the link. That's what I see.
You see all of that?
So definitely check it out on their channels if you haven't seen it. Now, today, we're going to take a look at the schedule and break down the challenge areas, and I'll give my way too early predictions as to how I think the season's going to go. We're going to start with the opening game of the season, which technically is a home game, but as has been discussed since February, the Eagles will be playing in Brazil, and they'll be playing the Green Bay Packers. Now, we have all offseason to prepare for this game, but the Packers proved to be a better team than most people expected last season, and they were on a rebuild year. Now, I think the Eagles are a better team on paper, since that's only what we have at this point, and the Eagles are going to want to make a strong statement coming into week one that they're leaving the collapse of last season behind. So I do have them winning this game to get things started. That having been said, of the first 4 games that the Eagles are facing, this one I think is the one that they're most likely to lose, just because there's a lot of unknowns when it comes to this particular game. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons. This is the true home opener, and it's a tried and true method for the NFL. You give the Eagles a primetime game against Kirk Cousins in week 2. The NFL did it each of the last 2 seasons. While Kirk Cousins is no longer with the Vikings, the Eagles still face off against Kirk Cousins week 2 primetime game. Now, Kirk Cousins has a well-known reputation for not playing well outside of the 1 o'clock time slot on Sundays. And the Eagles are 11-6 in Monday Night Football in the last 10 years. So because of all that, because we've got Jason Kelce, who's going to be joining the Monday Night Countdown crew, giving his good vibes to the Eagles in their Monday Night Football appearance, honestly, I think the Eagles are just going to be the better team against the Atlanta Falcons. The Eagles are going to come away with the win here, and it shouldn't be that much of a contest. Next up is the Saints on the road. The only part of this I think that is tricky is that the Eagles have to play in New Orleans, which is a solid home field advantage for the Saints. That said, I think the Eagles overcome that and dominate the Saints, so that's another win. And then the Eagles round out the first block of games with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The team's going to be looking at this game, though, as a real sign of whether or not they're bouncing back from the horrific wild card game that capped off the historic collapse that ended last season. The Eagles lost to the Buccaneers in the wild card round. The Eagles will need this win. I do think they're going to get it at this particular stage of the season. But starting off that first 4 games, this first block of games, I think the Eagles go 4-0. Now, they could go 3-1 if they lose to the Packers in week 1. Could happen. I wouldn't be overly mad if that's the only game that they lose, especially given the fact that the NFC South is widely regarded to be the worst division in the NFL. So, I think the Eagles have a good start to get a good palate cleanser from whatever ended last season. Now, if the Eagles lose to an NFC South team to start the season, I won't be happy. If the Eagles fall to the Packers and another NFC South team, I think that's cause for alarm bells. Now, the Eagles have an early bye week this year. They have the bye week in week 5 after their first 4 games. Not really a great spot for the Eagles just in general. I'm not a big fan of the early bye weeks. This is probably the toughest part of the schedule, is the fact that the bye week comes so early for the team. It's not the earliest it could come. Bye weeks start happening during week 4. I think this is going to come out in the wash because the Eagles will have a mini bye later in the season. We'll talk about that in a minute. But we'll, of course, see how the Eagles adapt to that. Coming off of the bye, though, in week 6, the Eagles will start to face some really tough teams. The first team off the bye is week 6, the Cleveland Browns. And I do have the Eagles winning this one because I'm not sure if the Browns are up to the task of containing the Eagles' offense. But the AFC North, compared to the NFC South, is widely regarded as the toughest division in football. So we can't shake those teams off. They can be annoying. I think the Eagles will take care of business with the Browns. Week 7 has the Eagles' first divisional matchup. That's going to come up on the road against the Giants. The Giants did diddly squat this offseason, losing more pieces of their team than they really gained back. So I'm unsurprisingly picking the Eagles to defeat the Giants here. Week 8, another AFC North team. The Eagles will be going up against the Cincinnati Bengals on the road. And Joe Burrow is an exceptional quarterback. The Bengals have been in contention with him under center. If he stays healthy, I think the Eagles suffer their first loss of the season right here. Week 9 has the Eagles coming home to face the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Eagles last faced the Jaguars in 2022. They defeated Doug Peterson's team 29-21. The Jaguars can be annoying when they want to be, so that's why I think the Eagles will lose to this team as well. They can just be one of those teams that's perennially annoying, and it could be a little bit of a surprise here. Week 10 has the first matchup with the Dallas Cowboys on the road. It's been a while since the Eagles have won a game in Jerry World, so the Eagles could lose this game. But I do think that they pull one out here simply because the Cowboys, who promised to go all in this offseason, are leaving fans wondering what all in actually means for the Dallas Cowboys. The Eagles certainly outmaneuvered them roster-wise. The Cowboys lost a bunch of players, a bunch of key contributors. Their biggest move really was bringing back Ezekiel Elliott, who spent last season with the New England Patriots. I'm not sure that that's enough. So I think the Eagles pull out a win in Dallas for the first time in a while. So at this point, we're through week 10. To recap, the Eagles are likely to go 3-2 over this stretch of 5 games. Initially, I think the losses are coming at the hands of the Bengals and Jaguars. Jaguars probably the least likely of the two of those teams to win over the Eagles. If that's the case, I do think the second loss might come against the Dallas Cowboys. But if the Eagles give up 2 games in this stretch, as long as it's not against the Giants, we'll be fine. This is probably going to be the toughest stretch of the schedule. It's certainly not a gauntlet run like last season's end of the season was, but it's going to be a tough stretch. So if you combine the 3-2 projection that I have with the first block of the season before the bye week, that's giving the Eagles right now a projected record of 7-2. Week 11 has the Eagles at home against the Washington Commanders. And look, Jaden Daniels probably going to be a sight for sore eyes for Commanders fans. But I still don't think that the Commanders are really up for it. Commanders really aren't in contention for the playoffs. I'm predicting that the Eagles are going to win here, although I do think that divisional matchups can be wonky enough where the Commanders, again, they could just be annoying. This is also a Thursday night football game, which throws another wrench into this, but working in the Eagles' favor is that home field advantage typically factors into it a little bit more for teams on a short week, like the Eagles will be. Additionally, the Commanders have a late bye week, so it's not like they're coming off of a bye or what have you. They have their bye week several weeks from now at this point. So ultimately, I think the Eagles do pull off the win here. I wouldn't be surprised, though, because the Commanders have, again, just that divisional matchup because of how frequently the teams meet up. Could be a little bit surprising and could be a little bit wonky. 2 seasons ago, the Commanders actually dealt the Eagles their first loss. Last season, one of the games went into overtime. Week 12 has the Eagles on the road against the Los Angeles Rams, Sunday Night Football. If you remember back to last season's matchup against the Los Angeles Rams, the Eagles shut them down in the second half after the Rams were pretty well in it during the first half of the game. The Eagles were able to make major defensive adjustments under former defensive coordinator Sean Desai. I expect nothing less from Vic Fangio, and I'm hopeful that the Eagles will put on a similar performance because Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua proved to be really formidable weapons for the Rams. And honestly, I think that this is going to be one of those challenges for the Eagles. But I do think that they come out with a win here, and so that puts another win in the Eagles column. Week 13 has the Eagles on the road against the Baltimore Ravens, and the Ravens are a team that scare me a little bit. They're a really good team. They should have been in the Super Bowl last season, in my opinion, and after picking up Derrick Henry in free agency, they're going to be even more of a force for the Eagles to contend with. So I think the Eagles take an L here. So this is block 3, this stretch of 3 games. According to my predictions, I think the Eagles are going to get 2 wins, 1 loss during this stretch of 3 games. Even if the Eagles only take 1 win and they take on 2 losses during this stretch of 3 games, as long as it's not to the Commanders, the Eagles will be in pretty good shape for the final stretch of the season, this block 4 that I have here. 1 loss, I think, is realistic in this stretch. 2 losses, the Eagles could get away with. That'll set the Eagles up. We're going to go into this as a record of 9-3. Now, the final stretch of the season is quite literally a home stretch. Except for 1 game, which is going to be the Eagles' second matchup against the Washington Commanders, the Eagles are going to be at home. And when you look at the opponents, there should be no fear of a late season collapse like what happened with the Eagles last year, unless it's something self-induced. So, week 14, Eagles at home against the Carolina Panthers. Carolina Panthers, worst team in football last season, so I think the Eagles will handle business. They're going to pick up a win. Week 15, Pennsylvania Bowl. Eagles, Steelers. This game is a game the Eagles should take home. The Eagles, again, are at home this game. The Steelers got Russell Wilson and Justin Fields in the offseason, but neither are really going to be enough for that team, in my opinion. Plus, the Eagles got Kenny Pickett, who will be invaluable when it comes to offering his own insights into the Steelers' offense and how the Eagles can potentially game plan for that, given that Kenny Pickett was the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers last season. I think the Eagles have enough in their tool bag to be able to pull out a victory in this one. Although, if the Eagles do lose this one, I think it's probably going to be the least consequential of the last several. So honestly, I think, realistically, I wouldn't be too mad if the Eagles lost the Pennsylvania Bowl. But I do have the Eagles winning this game. Now, if you've been doing math so far, you know that the way that the schedule is constructed, 6 of the games are against division opponents. For the Eagles, those are the Cowboys, Giants, and Commanders. Now, if you've been doing the math so far, you know that the Eagles haven't yet faced their division rivals twice, and we're heading into the final 3 games of the season that we're looking at. So, the only difficult part about this home stretch of the schedule, in my opinion, are the final 3 games, because they're all against division rivals. Week 16, Eagles' last home game. It's against the Commanders. It's an absolutely winnable game for the same reasons that I mentioned earlier. Plus, by this point, the Commanders should be looking at booking tee times in January. Win for the Eagles. Week 17, the home matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. Depending on how both teams are doing, this is a prime candidate to be flexed into Sunday Night Football. As much as the Eagles could lose to Dallas on the road, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they did lose to the Cowboys in Jerry World, I don't think the Eagles drop the home matchup. I think in a worst case scenario, the Eagles split against the Cowboys, and the Eagles deliver a late Christmas present to Eagles fans, beating Dallas at home. The final game is at home against the New York Giants. Now, we don't know right now exactly what the timing of that game is going to be. The NFL, as in years past, has held off on locking in dates and times for the Week 18 games until after all of the Week 17 games are played. This is because the NFL wants to make sure that any game that's going to be broadcast in a primetime spot is going to have playoff implications. But if you've been following my projections, assuming the Eagles pick up just the losses that I've projected, they would be at 13-3. They could be, based off of maybe picking up a couple extra losses over the course of the season, maybe against the Packers, maybe against the Rams, or maybe against the Cowboys. The Eagles could be anywhere from 11-5 to 13-3, which is a good solid spot to end the season on, especially if they're on a win streak. So this should be more than enough to secure a playoff spot. The Giants, again, should be watching from the couch. In a perfect world, the Eagles rest their starters and still demolish the New York Giants. Though, if they lose this one because it's a meaningless game played on a Sunday afternoon, but I think the Eagles probably will put the Giants away here. So we're still far out. My projection, I think the Eagles very likely are going to go 14-3, with losses coming against the Cincinnati Bengals, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Baltimore Ravens. Although, again, there could be some other losses mixed in there. I do think that they could finish anywhere between 11-6 and 14-3, depending on how things go. Again, other potential losses that they could pick up. They could lose the season opener against the Green Bay Packers. They could lose in Jerry World. They could lose against the LA Rams. Just based off of the schedule, based off of what I know about these teams, that's kind of where my gut is leading me, is that they're going to finish somewhere between 11-6 and 14-3. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Where do you think the Eagles will finish? Who could give the Eagles a surprise challenge in the schedule? Let me know. And thank you so much to everybody for tuning into the Bird's Nest Podcast. You can support the Bird's Nest Podcast by liking and subscribing to Bird's Nest Media right here on YouTube, and by sharing to your social media pages. You can also find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Amazon Podcasts, and Spotify. Please visit birdsnestmedia.com for additional Eagles coverage, and if you feel so inclined to support us in a different way, you can find the link to our Patreon in the description below or at birdsnestmedia.com. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let's go Eagles!